Okay, we're live.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on Resilience Rising. We're going to be waiting for more to join us. As they start trickling in, we can get started with today's webinar. Thank you for being here. Okay, as people slowly start to trickle in, we're gonna get started with today's webinar. Welcome, everyone. Greetings to you all, wherever you may be around this global community. Thank you for joining us in this virtual space of exchange and sharing, a moment that we will be together. My name is Nati Garcia. My ancestral roots tie to the Maya people in a village of Ixtahuacan in the western highlands of Guatemala. My people from the Mum speakers. I'm also as part of cultural survival staff. And I just would like to extend my deepest warmth to each one of you. Good day, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time may be. This webinar is on disaster response and climate crisis management. It's a special webinar on a special newsletter that we recently published and printed on this topic. Before we move into the discussion and the conversation, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So just some important points before we start today. We have interpretation available. For this group, it's English and Spanish. So to access the interpretation, please click on the world icon in the bottom navigation bar to choose your language. Please let us know if you're having any difficulties in the chat. Also, because we are having interpretation simultaneously, always recommend to speak in a very graceful way, gentle with pauses in between for interpreters to capture the full content of what we're going to be sharing. This event is also being streamed live on Cultural Survival's Facebook page, YouTube page. It is being recorded and will be posted later on our website at www.cs.org. And you can also visit it in our YouTube channel to watch again and share with any of your social networks. So thank you for your time here. You can also learn about cultural survival by visiting our website. You can follow us on our Facebook and our Instagram accounts as well at CS.org. And if you would like to support us, you can also make a donation at our website at cs.org/donate. After this webinar, after you hear from the panelists, we can continue to do this amazing work. We will offer Q&A to take place at the end of the presentation, if time permits. So if you do have any questions that may come up as the audience, please feel free to write it in the comments. And we have our staff members who will be collecting those questions. Also, you can insert it in the Q&A poll as well. Just to share a little bit, if you are new to our webinar sessions, or if maybe you perhaps have not attended, or if it's the first time you're hearing cultural survival, we are an organization that has worked in protecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and support their self-determination, cultures, and political resilience since 1972. So we're about over 53 years around there. We're a nonprofit, Indigenous-led organization based in Cambridge, Massachusetts States. And thank you to our staff members here in the background, also supporting this virtual webinar. Cultural Survival envisions a future that respects and honors the inherent rights and dynamic cultures of Indigenous peoples, deeply and richly interwoven in the land. As our people, we're really connected to the land. The land connects us to our languages, our spiritual traditions, and our artistic expressions. And it's all rooted in self-determination and self-governance. We do this through a four-pronged approach at Cultural Survival. If you visit our website, you can also see it. It's through grant making, advocacy, capacity building, and communications. Those are our four-pronged approaches, but there are many layers to that. It's a big woven landscape. And for today's webinar, I would like to, in the words of our director, Amy Robinson, who could not join us today in this webinar, I would just like to share a brief speech on her behalf. We can see with our own eyes that climate change is increasing. The severity, frequency, and impacts of extreme events in recent years. And scientists predict that the global temperatures will continue to rise, driving increases in intensity of severe weather and related to deaths and damage. This is something I feel that we're all witnessing around the globe. Indigenous peoples living in balance with Mother Earth contribute to the least climate change, and yet are disproportionately impacted by it. Also being contributors, but also being unimpacted. Our hope for the future of our communities, humanity, and all life comes from knowing that our languages, values, governance, and knowledge systems carry solutions to today's most pressing issues, including climate change adaptation and mitigation, which is going to be our topic for this webinar. As Cultural Survival, we carry solutions to today's most pressing issues, including climate change and adaptation. And we want to uplift the knowledge and promote these actions that Indigenous communities are addressing. And so we have an amazing panelists here with us today who are going to be sharing their tremendous knowledge, their stewardship, and the biodiversity of their communities, and also sharing with us the navigation between the weathers and the climate changes, and offering systems to prepare for extreme weather events. Perhaps we may all know this, but I will repeat it again and again, as it's something that's really important to be aware of. As Indigenous peoples, Indigenous peoples really steward around 25% of the world's land, including a large portion of Mother Earth's biodiversity, as well as carbon stored in soil, biomass, and at least 36% of the world's intact forests. These are pristine forests that haven't been yet in contact with any form of development. So I feel that it's time to listen to Indigenous people. At Cultural Survival, something that we tremendously advocate, hold this space, and listening to the Indigenous communities and supporting them to acting on in addressing climate change in their territories. And so we're going to have this wonderful opportunity to hear from these four panelists, for them to share their wisdom and the generous time in this virtual space. So thank you for being here again. And we're going to be sharing the topic on Indigenous wisdom and disaster response and climate crisis management. This was a recent Cultural Survival Quarterly issue that has been in print. So if you are interested in receiving a copy, you can visit our website as well after this webinar. We do have some copies that we have printed as well, and you can have access to it digitally. So we're going to begin today's conversation, introducing our panelists. Here first we have Rochelle Morgan-Verdin, a proud citizen of the United Houma Nation, a passionate advocate for the rights and sovereignty of Indigenous peoples, both in her own community and across the globe. She holds a master's degree in international law and human rights from the United Nations Mandate University for Peace, and a bachelor's in Latin America and Caribbean studies from Emory University. Rochelle brings both academic depth and lived experience to her work, with a strong focus on the intersections of climate change, displacement, and indigenous peace. She has actively participated in international negotiations that directly impact Indigenous peoples, ensuring that their voices, priorities, and knowledge systems are not only heard but respected. Through advocacy and policy development, she works to create meaningful and lasting change for Indigenous peoples worldwide. So thank you, Rochelle, for joining us here. And also we have another wonderful panelist who was one of our former fellows in last year as part of our fellowship program that we offer. Donai is a rising Muir Indigenous leader and communicated environmental advocate from the Chittagong Hilltops of Bangladesh. He holds a degree in criminology from the University of Dhaka and has been at the forefront of grassroots movements opposing environmental harmful projects, particularly in the Chumbuk Hill area. Donai has led impactful campaigns to defend Indigenous lands and ecosystems, working closely with local communities. Donai is known for mobilizing and empowering Indigenous youth in the pursuit of sustainable development, land rights, and cultural preservation. He is a cultural survival formal Indigenous Youth Fellow, as previously mentioned, and is currently working with the Land Reform and Development Organization in Bangladesh. He was recently also awarded a UNESCO Small Grants as a community team lead to promote and preserve Indigenous cultural instruments in the Chittagong Hill Tracts community. Thank you for being here, Donai. It's a pleasure to have you. And we have two other amazing panelists, Raista, Palikhe, if I pronounce your name wrong, my apologies, is from Pokhara, Nepal. She belongs to the ethnic community Newar, one of the indigenous communities of Nepal. She holds a master's degree in environmental science and is currently working with the Green Intelligence, an organization focused on restoring degraded land through sustainable agroforestry and supporting farmers across Nepal. Raista works closely with farmers to help them register their land and trees using this mobile app. So hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that as well in this conversation. Her communities. She is passionate about protecting nature, improving land and soil health, and helping people build better lives through her eco-farming system. So thank you for being here, Isaac. And as our fourth panelist that we have here is Miennies, is from South Africa. He is from the Sai community, which is better known as the Khomani Sai people in the North Cape province of South Africa. He is a community activist and the current managing director and youth nature conservatives of Palikhe First International, which is an organization established in February of 2025 to bring about an awareness of this death certification in climate change in the Kalara region of Northern Cape. He is also an assistant of the traditional leader of the Khomani San and also an activist for the repatriation of the human remains of our people from Scotland, the people from Scotland, Austria, and other parts of the world. Very, very tremendous work there. He is a Secretary General of the Community Associate for South Africa's Africans in Natural Resources as well, where they focus on communities having access to natural resources in management. So these are our four panelists. I applaud you all, and I raise my hand with such warmth and such gratitude to be able to be the moderator for this discussion that we have here. We have a few questions for all four panelists, and hopefully after these questions and hearing as the audience, we can take note of our comments or observations, and we can have a little bit of time near the end to be able to have the panelists answer them. But I highly recommend to please take note of your reflections as you hear each panelist speak, because they're coming from very, very tremendous experience and a lot of inspiration. When I was reading your introductory, I was inspired. So, started on the first question for all panelists is how do disasters affect not just the land and environment, but also the culture and identity of your people? Each panelist will get between 2 to 3 minutes. If we can go in the order that we presented each one of you.
Hi there, everyone. Aletu and Yakuke. Hello, and thank you to Cultural Survival for having me on today's webinar. It's an honor to be here and also to be in such wonderful company. Thank you to Cultural Survival for your efforts to center and uplift Indigenous people's voices on this important issue. Seyo Chafuyat Rochelle. My name is Rochelle Dulac Ametele. I'm from Dulac, Louisiana. As Nati mentioned, I'm a citizen of the United Houma Nation, and we are a coastal tribe on Turtle Island, located along the Gulf of Mexico. We are Sakchi Houma, crawfish people, and many in my family are fishermen or have been at some point in their lives. Our close connection to the Gulf Coast and the waters that sustain us means that we are deeply impacted by climate change. And so to Nati's question, the impact of disasters on our people goes far beyond environmental damage. It really strikes at the heart of who we are because it impacts directly our traditional lifeways. If you walk through our community today, 4 years after Hurricane Ida, it looks like a bomb went off. Homes are torn apart, debris everywhere, stores, restaurants, shops, they're all abandoned. And the community where my family grew up for generations is completely unrecognizable. And I would even argue that in many instances, it no longer exists. So many of us who have left after those storms, really, it's very unlikely that they will return. And the high cost of flood insurance, the constant cycle of storms has made it almost impossible and unaffordable to live where our families have been for generations. And so this kind of destruction really digs up a lot of trauma. And it's a constant visual reminder that our lives, our homes, our history, that they're not worth the effort to save. When the government doesn't help us rebuild, it reinforces the deeper truth that they're not invested in addressing the root causes of these disasters, like coastal erosion, subsidence and land loss, all caused by extractive industry, that makes these storms more devastating to begin with. In fact, our community has really learned to rely on one another, and we look to one another to resolve our issues. And in many instances, if you look around, it's church groups that come from out of state that are much more a support to our community than the federal government or the state and local government. And that kind of neglect really chips away at your spirit. It creates a sense of abandonment, and it erodes trusts in institutions that are supposed to be there to protect us. So what's really happened and what we see is a culture of self-reliance and community and mutual aid. that devastation mentioned really isn't limited to a single storm. It happened much before Hurricane Ida. I'm sure many of you have heard about Hurricane Katrina and other storms. But what we've watched visually, apart from what I mentioned before, is things like our oak trees are dying. There, you see skeletons of what was there before due to saltwater erosion. Oil pipelines have split and divided our land. And if we want to continue our traditional fishing lifeways, our only choice is to eat contaminated seafood that has the remnants of dispersants from BP oil spill in it. Those sorts of things really magnify the structural violence that we've faced for generations. And when we talk about natural disasters impacting Indigenous peoples, I kind of balk and resist that because much of what we see is a human-made crisis. And it's fueled by corporate greed and by neglect and by human-made decisions that impact Indigenous peoples the hardest. That cultural cost is enormous. When we look at what that's done to our culture and our community, it's been devastating. We look to the next generation to help maintain our lifeways in a completely new context. And so, as I mentioned before, one of the positives is the development of very strong mutual support networks, knit, family-centered cultures of sharing. We share our abundance with one another. And what you also see is there's no fear in giving because we know that our community will be there for us when we need it. There's a deep culture of care and support for one another, and a wonderful sense of not only community, but sense of solidarity and sense of humor that I think you'd be hard pressed to find in many places. And so one of the things that I treasure about our culture that is really in spite of what I've described is the ability to be present in the moment. When you've lost so much, you kind of lose an attachment to material things, and your obsession with the future and what is to come is kind of removed, and you realize what matters, which is today and the present. And so all of these disasters, I don't call them natural, I call them human-made disasters, human-made crises, have many positives, but they've certainly impacted our ability to preserve our culture and influence the way that we've grown in our resilience and our ability to continue on in the face of those challenges and a growing diaspora of Houma people.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you for sharing, and I think the words that you shared so far, I really resonates with me, and I'm sure with other of our audiences here. And community is very well. That's how these crises are formed. I think you explained it very truthfully. And we're going to pass it over to Donai now to share in response to the question. I can repeat it again as well. How do disasters affect not just the land and environment, but also the culture and identity of your people?
It's my turn, right? Well, I can't hear it clearly, actually. That's why I'm a little bit confused. It's okay. Well, thanks for having me with all of you. I'm very great to be here with all of you and share my experience that I work around almost at 7 and 6 years. In our context, in context of Bangladesh, our main problem is the government is still not yet considered about our existence. I mean the indigenous existence in Bangladesh. But then when you ask about the disaster effect, not just the land, but also environment, and also for culture and identity for our people. We used to call and used to say that indigenous culture and identity is actually deeply rooted about their land, and the land and environment actually shape their culture and identity. But when we going to recognize their identity and their existence in their state or land. It actually something like the
Hi, is it just my signal? Did we lose you? Okay.
Perhaps we could
living
just switch to video. Switch
like
video off.
the land.
We just I think Donai, maybe we can keep your video off if you like. Make the
I'm
signal
really
bandwidth
sorry.
stronger.
I'm going to
That's okay.
disconnect it for that. You can keep another one. I am my net little bit disrupted.
Okay.
I will.
Well, let us know when you're ready, and then we can come back. Okay. We want to hear from Bangladesh. I think it's really the situation there, and the work that you're doing is very important for this global work that we're all doing together. Right? We'll pass it to you.
Hi everyone, I am Raista Palikhe from Nepal. First of all, I would really like to take a moment and thank Culture Survivor for giving me this great platform to keep a voice for those community that are not able to. So to answer your question, disaster, of course, evidently has devastated our land and environment, but I feel like the major concern on cultural aspect has not been given. As they also deeply erode the cultural aspect and identity of different community, the increasing frequency and intensity of disaster in Bigu Thami Bhume community, which is in Dolkha, almost 200 kilometers from capital city of Pokhara, have driven many families to migrate in the search of safety and stability. So this migration has often necessary, which often for like survivor, has been disrupting intergenerational bonds and of course transmission of indigenous knowledge and practice to their younger generation. And in as a result, the younger generation has separated from their ancestral land and elders, which is becoming increasingly disconnected from the cultural tradition, language and values that really defines their identity. So another example I would love to give you, that in that community, Bigu Thami Bhume community, there is this sacred temple which has hold this significant amount of religious importance for their people. However, with the disaster happening every year due to the erratic weather condition here in Nepal mostly, though that sacred temple has been affected disturbingly. So um so as a result, their spiritual and cultural significance has been impacted by the disaster that has been going in recent years. And as a result, this so many indigenous knowledge has been disrupted, in specifically in for this temple has been disrupted by disaster. So as a result, to sum it up, I would like to say that this community has not only faces the loss of natural resources, but also ri- has also losing its cultural heritage. The erosion that is intangible heritage, stories, ritual practice, and place of spiritual significance poses a long-term threat to the identity and, of course, resilience to the people. So yeah, thank you.
you know, I think it's that concept of erosion that Rochelle you shared, and also hearing Raista speak as well, this erosion that's occurring, and so how our thank you so much for the trust in sharing that, Raista, and my heart goes to you and the community who, you know, losing a bit of our heritage sites is impactful to a bit of our existence, and it really affects us. So thank you for sharing that, Raista. Donai, how is your audio? Did you want to? We have a few more minutes before we go to the final panelist.
Yes,
Fire?
it's
Okay,
okay,
thank you.
yeah, I can fix. I don't know now yet. But it's still, yeah, okay. Well, I'm directly going to the land holds our ancestors, our stories, our songs, and our sense of belongingness. And the natural
Okay. Yes, it looks good signal. It's, as you know, as Indigenous communities in the rural regions where Donai is, the signal and the networking can be one of the challenges. And so we always try our best. If we can link in Donai's project and also his article, just so that the audience here can have access to the amazing work that they're doing on the grounds and his community. We'll move on with for the first question to answer with our next panelist from South Africa. Byron, if you have the floor now.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Nati. Thank you for inviting me to this, which I think is a very important step for Indigenous people to start with the knowledge sharing from all across the globe to see where we as a collective can contribute to each other's plight, each other's future. So, as earlier said, my name is Brian Miennies. I am from South Africa. I am from the Sa community, or better known as the Khomani San, that occupies the southern part of the Northern Cape province of South Africa. I am also currently the managing director. But the question that you ask is how do disasters affect not just the land and environment, but also the culture and identity of my people. Nati, over the various years that we as the Sa community have lived in the Kalahari region, historically, we were pastoralists. We're a pastoralist community that have lived all over Southern Africa. So it is not just that certain part of area in the country that we have lived as it is now. So through all of the years that went past, 30 years ago, if you would have traveled to the Kalahari region, you would have seen how green the area was. But due to climate change and land aggregation, much of the land, the grazing land has disappeared, and it has resulted that many of our communities had to downscale on their farming or either give up their farming, which is the only income for majority of them. Because if you would travel to the Kalahari region, you would find that we are about 200 kilometers away from the nearest town where we could get fresh produce, fresh tomatoes, fresh milk, etc. So we have to rely on our traditional knowledge so far from everyone and everything. So the environment has really suffered, and by its suffering, our culture has also suffered, which means that our languages, everything, and the identity of our people have been completely lost because of we have lost our native language. It was in 1973 that the government has declared it as extinct. So, by the efforts of my great great grandmother, Elsie Falboy, in 1997, they discovered her, and she was the first of the 25 language speakers to surface. So right now, we 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 have about one person that is speaking the language still. So a lot has happened uh, uh, with our people and the environment. So us relying on the land for survival, for medicine, for food, uh, we are struggling. We don't get so much rains. We don't get so much of the different foods. Our cattle struggle, our sheep struggle. So grazing land is an issue. Uh, Land degradation is an issue, and that's why we started Kalahari Earthkeepers International in February of 2024 for this sole purpose to advocate for the Kalahari region on the issues of land degradation and climate change.
Thank you so much, Brian, for that. And that's really segue into the next question that we have for each one of you. We're hearing, the heartfelt scenarios and situations that are occurring within each one of your territories from around the globe. We have a lot of panelists from different regions around the globe here. And, what projects, actions, hearing from what you just shared, what projects or actions have you taken to raise awareness and educating others? And we know that, we're in this together, and it's unfortunate that it has to be us taking those actions and taking those initiatives. I just recall Rochelle's, this humanity is human made, and it's a crisis that it's, from institutions. However, we would like to hear from each one of you here. What are you doing on the grounds, and how in responding to this climate crisis in your community? So Rochelle.
Thank you for that question, Nati. And I just have to second what Brian said. These spaces are so important for us to be able to share best practices. I think that it's really important for us to not only build networks of solidarity with one another, but also to share in things that are working, that are functional, and to pass those along. So I'll just start off by saying that I've been deeply involved in efforts to preserve and celebrate our Houma culture, understanding that work is a form of climate resilience. I firmly believe that cultural preservation is a climate solution. So I'll just start with making that point. I really want to drive that home. I've worked with my relatives to give educational presentations to students, done all sorts of organizing to create volunteer groups to help some of our elders who have tried to rebuild after the storms. and help to organize cultural events that celebrate and honor our traditions and help pass them down onto the next generation. In this context of diaspora, where people are moving away, they're disconnected from who they are and where they come from, that becomes increasingly important. And one of the most meaningful things I've volunteered with is something called the Houma Language Project, which is a project focused on revitalizing our language, which is honestly part of what gives me the most hope for the future. One particular challenge is teaching that language in the context of a diaspora, where you have young people that are being born and raised in places far flung and disconnected from our traditional fishing and trapping lifeways. So this means that even if we do teach them our traditional language, it's divorced from context and sometimes meaning, and that can be a bit challenging. But I find that the Houma Language Project has done a really amazing job at helping to pass down some of those cultural understandings and teachings. And the part that I've been involved in with them is particularly focused on collecting oral histories from our elders and also in developing a digital database to ensure that Houma people can access information about who they are and where they come from, regardless of where they live, and also separate from colonial institutions of record keeping, which can have a lot of different barriers to access that we want to eliminate. I think it's really important to try and leverage technology to serve our people, especially again in the context of diaspora, for people to know who they are and where they come from is integral to this cultural preservation effort that I believe that is so fundamental to climate solutions and adaptation. More recently, I've been working with you all to try and just tell our story. I think it's really important to raise awareness generally. We're a very isolated and rural community, and many times people, they go to New Orleans, but they certainly don't go all the way down into the bayou. And so our story is many times overlooked and untold, especially given the fact that our tribe is a state recognized tribe and the US federal government does not recognize us. I've also participated in international climate negotiations at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. I did that with my dear friend and mentor, who I believe is on this call, Kim Gottschalk. Hello, it's great to see you here. And I've also attended FEMA and US Army Corps of Engineers tribal consultations on various government policies that impact tribal communities like ours. My goal is ultimately to increase our visibility and to ensure that our voices are heard at all levels of decision making, from the local level to the international level. And I hear a lot of people talk about we need to be at the table. I don't think that's enough. I think we need to be a part of envisioning and building that table from the ground up. There are too many rooms where decisions about our futures and the futures of our descendants are being discussed without us present. And from my perspective, that is absolutely unacceptable and intolerable and must be rectified immediately.
Powerful words, Rochelle. Thank you for sharing. And if any of the panelists, you do have links to your projects, if you do mention them, I think our audience here would be interested in receiving links to those projects mentioned. And I raise my hands to, yes, we need to envision this together. And we need to start building together on the grounds because we're in it together. We have one planet, one heart, one mind is a concept that I've learned from the Coast Salish people of the North on Turtle Island. And I hold that dear to my spirit. We have one heart, one mind, one home to share together. And we follow this question over to Donai. If you don't need to put your video on, perhaps if you could answer to this, share what projects or actions that you have taken to raise awareness or educate others in response to the climate crisis in your community. Hi, Donai. Were you able to hear that question? The second question?
Oh, I'm really sorry for constant disruption. I cannot hear about your question. Can you repeat,
Yeah,
please?
so that second question, I'll put it in the chat as well. Maybe you can read it in the chat here.
Am I starting with the first question that you asked
That
me?
second question,
Oh, yeah, second question.
yes.
Oh, okay. I'm I'm sorry again with all of you for constant my net instability and disruptions for with in my work. I'm going to work for my community in on climate change issue and our cultural and heritage issue. I actually always prioritize reconnecting our cultural revival that we lost with climate awareness. The culture and climate is closely connected, and when due to the climate change impact, we lost lots of our rich culture like songs and our might, our story, our way of living that we follow by generation by generation. Now, due to the climate change impact, when we try to going to adapt a new situation, a new environment, and then we lose our ancestral knowledge and stories and their songs. And most of the generation, like me, youth generation now, most of them cannot connect their life practice with the old generations. And then we have initiated the last 4 months. We have initiated our youth storytelling. It's actually supported by the Hill Regional Council in our country. We have initiated youth-led storytelling project, and that through this project we document our traditional ecological knowledge, such as farming cycles based on lunar calendar that we follow, and rain prediction techniques using bird behavior, and share we share them, the documented stories and videography. We share them through our community people, through workshops and youth performance. This effort not only actually preserve our knowledge, but reconnect the youth generation, the elders, and we through this action, we actually rebuild our pride in indigenous identity again. And another project significantly mentionable is that I have lead a community campaign to product that I mentioned in my biography, that in our hills, particularly in Chittagong Hill Tracks, in our hills, Chingbuk Hills, Chingbuk Hills, which is both ecologically vital and spiritual sacred to Mru people, and the Mru indigenous community people. Maybe, yeah, in 20 in 4 year back in 1920, when a group of international company jointly with military trust in our country, when they planned build 5-star hotel on our hill, a planned 5-star tourism project threatened to displace around more than 1,000 indigenous people on the hill living from their ancestral land. And it threatened actually destroy our ancestral land, open the area to environmental destruction. And then we organize our people, we protest, and we lead a media campaign and dialogue with civil society, emphasizing on how environmental destruction equal to cultural destruction. And then currently I'm working with UNESCO under a small grant to revive and archive the traditional Mru musical instrument. The climate crisis is actually not only threatening our forests, it also erasing the raw materials and knowledge required to create this instrument. Because when the climate change impact our forests, we actually lost our many essential raw materials and environmental some special spices, which is actually essential to build our cultural instrument. And so we through this project, we initiated to rebuild the forest by utilizing our knowledge, indigenous knowledge, by discussing our elders and connect the youth. And then we, through this project, actually, we collaboratively youth and elders, we trying to preserve our forest again and the particular species and essential cultural environment for build our the threatening cultural instrument. Through this project, we are still, this project is on the way, and so the final result and outcome will need to 3 or 4 months again. And I that's it.
Thank you, Donai. We're so glad to have to hear a little bit of you sharing, and you know, storytelling has always been such a great way, part of one of our ways of being, or selling and passing down that knowledge is very important to the next generation. Amazing work that you're doing there, Donai. We'll pass it now to Raista, if you can share.
Okay, thank you for the question. So Thami community has been settling in the highlands of Nepal, of Dolkha district has, and this community has been facing an ever pressing challenge, which is landslide, and each and every monsoon season have heavy rain triggers the slope failures that destroy their homes, their farmlands, critical infrastructure, which not only threats their lives but also their livelihood. So we have been always thinking about the ways how can about the ways that we can uh, stabilize their life, how we can make their life easier. Then we came across this idea called bioengineering. Since this community has been facing frequent landslide, we have advised them to adopt bioengineering. So bioengineering is a blend of traditional wisdom and scientific techniques. This helps to stabilize land and prevent erosion. So this community-led initiative began with collective discussion and planning, focusing on nature-based solution like planting deep root grasses, for example, grass or vetiver, and trees. For example, guava, which are very productive tree species and also give some fruits in return. Uh, you know, these species are chosen to reinforce vulnerable slopes. Uh, they also use in terracing or stone barrier and bamboo structure to reduce runoff and support the soil. So additionally, since I am working in a company called Green Intelligence, which is dedicated to restore the degraded landscape. So through our agroforestry project, we have distributed multi-purpose tree species to the farmer of this community. So these trees not only helps to sequester carbon, but also restore degraded land, and also diversify and maximize their income sources for families through fruits, nuts, spices, and other non-timber forest products. So by strengthening their livelihood, we aim to reduce the economic pressure that often drive migration. So additionally, we also have introduced regenerative agriculture practices in this area. So this method also helps to restore soil health, increase biodiversity, and enhance a long-term productivity without relying on chemical fertilizers. So we feel like reviving and promoting such traditional practices also helps to preserve cultural identity while building resilience to climate impacts. And lastly, but not the least, we have also conducted awareness sessions and lecture for youth and school children from age 10 to 2016, focusing mostly on climate change and impacts and its impact on the environment and the important role of the trees and plants that plays to mitigate this impact. So we feel we have always believed that by educating this younger generation we can foster environmental stewardship and encourage them to take active part in protecting their nature. So yeah, these are the things that we are doing, and we hope that we continue doing this positive change so that we can control or even mitigate the impacts that climate change has been given to us. So thank you.
Incredible, Raista, for sharing that. If you can share that link also to that bioengineering project that you mentioned in the organization, that would be for the audience if they want to learn more. Thank you. Going to Byron for the second question, and just be mindful of time as well. We have two more questions, and then we can definitely open it up to the audience here. Thank you for keeping in tune and being active in your listening. Brian.
Okay, no, thank you. Yes, the projects and actions that we have taken to raise awareness and educate others, and to respond to climate change in our community has been since the inception of Kalahari Earthkeepers International. We have had several engagements with our national, local, and regional government, and especially also other institutions like your International Union for Conservation of Nature, that we address these issues to them about what is happening in the area. So from the start, we had several workshops with our sister organizations like the LC Falboy Development Organization, which is run by Ivan Falboy, who is also a very sharp mind in terms of legal, legal, what you call it, legal training for communities. And with Ivan's help, we have and support, we have really been advocating for the rights of indigenous communities to exist and to have, like for instance, to know what their rights are, because you get people that comes into your area and they start to take pictures and they go out and they interpret the message from their narrative and not from what is really happening on the ground. So the projects that we have recently initiated is to begin with the language revitalization project. So we have in South Africa, we have the Pan-South African Language Board, which is an entity from the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. And we have recently engaged with them to ask them whether there is a way that they can assist us in terms of seeing how we can learn or have language classes within our community to teach the youngsters the language of our people. So with that said, what we also did is we found out, that in 1997, one of the linguists that came to the Kalahari actually developed an educational medium for anybody to learn. So I said to myself, let me take the opportunity and go meet him. So it's actually really funny. What happened is that I hiked, from Upington to Namibia to Windhoek to meet up with him and to ask him to come to our area to teach the people the language. So the linguist's name is Dr. Leofi Namasek. So we are now in the process of enforcing Pansal to come to the table with the Palikhe University to actually bring those classes to our communities, because the elders in our communities, they wish to speak the language. Other projects that we've done in partnership with our sister organizations in the Kalahari is to have a council of elders, which is those individuals within our community that carry the history of our people, that can talk about it, that can orally uh, 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 um, give that language to others, generations to come. So what we did with them is to set up a governance system of how they should govern themselves, also the community. So the education in terms of the climate change in our community, we are now at the process of finalization with an organization that will financially assist us in terms of getting some funding so that we can start our own community gardens, our own community conservation areas, our own community uh, 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 um, um, what's it called it, nurseries. So we have advocated for that on a national platform with the departments, with national government, and even as I'm speaking now, I am at the 25th Transfrontier and Conservation Areas Summit and Celebration in Harare, in Zimbabwe. And we have advocated, and I have advocated strongly within the summit for climate change, land aggregation, for the heads of state to actually bring about a policy change and an implementation within the SADC region, to say that the governments of SADC region should look at, uh, at, not just projects, but also the funding part for these initiatives, for these projects to happen. Because when will we start? Will we start when the last fish is caught? Will we start when the last tree is being cut down? Because it is really important also. One of the things that I've strongly advocated, and I'm going to mention two of the things, is that Article 14 or 16 of CITES says that you can't trade with rhino horn and ivory internationally. So what we said is that in the SADC region, for socio-economical purposes, let the SADC region start to trade with it. You don't have to trade with it internationally. I mean, the Asian community, like for instance, the Asian community, they can come to the shores, to our shores, which will also mean that, let's say for instance, just give us 10% of the Asian community, which is 4.6 billion. Give us just 10% of that community so that they can come and enjoy uh, those products here on the African continent, and go back and then tell a story to the rest of the world, and then come back and bring more people. bringing more people, it means more socio-economic development activities that can happen within the SADC region. And the other one was for the inclusion of these indigenous communities within the SADC structures, so that these SADC structures do not only talk about these areas, where these transfrontier areas, but the people that own these areas can sit on these boards, and they can, from from their own hearts, speak to the heads of state to say that this is what we want in these areas, because it is their land. It is their land. So why must they not speak to the heads of state directly for climate change projects to happen, for land desertification projects to happen, for conservation projects to happen? So that is part of my climate advocacy. And one of the persons, one of my colleagues came earlier this evening and said to me, "Hey, when you are a very, very adamant person, when you start a point, you finish it." I believe that my ancestors has called me for this, and I cannot take this lightly. I cannot take this lightly, because there are a generation of young leaders. There's a generation of indigenous people that rely on me. So for me, this platforms is I'm taking it serious, and I wish I can do more. I wish I had a billion so that I can give it out to every single community in the SADC region that struggles with these kinds of challenges. So, Palikhe Peoples International, I believe, with organizations like the Community Association for South Africans in Natural Resources, and the Community Leaders Network that is run by Dr. Rogers on the continent or in the subcontinent of Africa, called the Southern African Development Countries. I believe with their knowledge as the elders, we as the younger generation can learn so much from them. Really, we can learn so much from them, like weather patterns, like animal behavior. Those are the kinds of things that our great, great, great grandparents have lived by, because they lived freely with the wild animals. But today we have wildlife conflicts in areas like the Kruger Wild Reserve. So those kinds of things we must, as the younger generation, we must learn, and we must listen to our elders, because they are the first knowledge holders. They are the ancient knowledge holders of our communities, of our cultures, and of our languages. So, me myself, I have not been sleeping, and I have been actively involved in seeing that knowledge will be transferred to our youngsters and our communities. Yeah. So yeah, I think I will stop there, because I have a lot to say on that question. But yeah, let me stop there.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing your incredible work that you're doing. We just definitely can feel that energy coming through this virtual platform, and for everyone else responding to that. Thank you so much. We are just, due to timing, it's always, you know, if we had a fireplace and we were out there together, you know, we can stay the whole evening under the starlights sharing. And that's, you know, that's what our ancestors did. And Brian, you really put forward that the generation behind us and the generation ahead. And so we're going to go forward with the final question to our panelists, because some of our panelists also are in different time zones, and just to respect their time and commitment here. For us, it's morning, afternoon. For others, it's evening, past midnight, perhaps. So let's move with the closing question for the panelists on what important lessons from your work and what you're doing on the grounds could help other, you feel that maybe could be an inspiration in from other Indigenous communities facing similar issues here. We've heard a bit about it, but perhaps if you can highlight maybe one or two to the audience and to future audiences when they're going to be listening to this audio. We have Indigenous communities from around the globe and non-Indigenous. We have a whole community of people on this earth. So if you could share with the audience here, Rochelle.
Yes, thank you so much for this question. And I'm really excited to hear other people's responses. I'll speak from my perspective on the projects that I've been working on and what's kind of come out from those. And I think first and foremost, my biggest takeaway is don't wait. Don't wait for someone else to champion the idea. Don't wait for someone else to step up and do it. And in the instance of the impacts of climate change, don't wait for someone else to come save you, because they're not coming. So I think it's important to, if you have an idea, to try and find some support to get behind it and to make it happen on your own terms with your own community. It's always good to try and find funding from outside investors, but also remember that they have their own agendas. And many times you have more autonomy and freedom to execute a project in a way that's consistent with your own values if you yourself have gathered the support and it's something that is a community-driven initiative. I think along that line of thinking is also the power in mutual aid. Don't discount that. Don't look outside before you look inside. There's a lot of power within your own community, even if you're feeling disempowered for all of the reasons that we've mentioned on this webinar. I think that's where the true power lies, and there's a lot to be surprised by. Trust your network. Don't necessarily put all of your faith in outside institutions. There's a lot to be said for bottom-up organizing, horizontal structure within your own community. And also, I think, thirdly, look to technology to help bridge some of the distance that might be there. If you have access to technology, if people in your community have the training to be able to utilize it, that's a big if. That's not always the case, but if that is the case, don't be afraid to use digital tools to help people stay connected to their community, to their identity. Even if they have to do so from afar, having that can be a great tool. And in the absence of that, many times the challenges are that much bigger. I know it's not always a viable resource for everybody, but when possible, it can be something that can be a very powerful resource and tool. As I mentioned before, our ability to tell our story on our own terms, not having to go to colonial institutions to try and get information about who we are, told many times by researchers from outside the community, can be a very powerful way of instilling in our youth that sense of pride and identity in all sorts of contexts, whether they be in diaspora, in the context of migration, or any other lived reality.
Thank you, Rochelle, for that useful energy of inviting us to step in and be fearless. That's the energy of the youth, and thank you for bringing that forward. We move forward then with Donai. That's the fourth question.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you again. And I'm going to just short as the main key lesson in through my project and activities that I have done before is the climate justice must be culturally grounded. Solution cannot be just copied and pasted from one community to another community, because every context and every culture is unique, and their context, their system is unique. So it must be unique. The solution approach is also must be unique. So just copy and paste from one community to another communities, I think it does not make the sustainable solution. And another important insight is that youth engagement must be go beyond consultation. Young indigenous leaders need to be equipped with both ancestral knowledge and also modern tools. They must be trained and national and international workshop must be facilitated for their capability increasement and build their empowerment. And obviously then their cultural knowledge and their connectivity with root and their ground, it must be sound when they got the national and international training facilities. So it must be given. And the last one is the resistance is the form of resilience. Whether we are fighting for our forest right, our cultural right, and whenever we are going to documenting endangered language, these eight are not actually separate from each other. It's actually interconnected. It's all of these approaches are climate war, if we think in deep. So we should not make it separate. When we going to work for climate justice, we must raise concern and create concern about our cultural right, our recognition. Particularly, I mean the indigenous press. I belong to indigenous community, and we must continue advocating not only for environmental protection, but for our cultural land sovereignty, our recognition, and which are the foundation of long-term resilience. I think it is the main key point of my project that I initiated and conducted in past. I'm really sorry to all that for my constant net disruption. Thank you. Thank you to all.
Thank you. We'll move it with Raista, if you can share your thoughts.
So for me, in our journey to address the climate change, one of the most powerful lesson we have learned is that solution must be rooted in both land and the culture of the people who live in it. So, and another most important lesson we have learned during this project timeline is that indigenous knowledge is not outdated, but it's more adaptive, resilient, and powerful. Climate change solutions are most effective when they are built on the values, traditions, and ecological knowledge that have sustained our community for generations and maybe more generations to come. So, while facing climate challenges, collective action is more effective than individual solutions. Personally, we have seen the strength of the community when people come together for reforestation or seed sharing or traditional festivals or rebuilding after a disaster, whether it be landslide, flood, or even an earthquake. So shared work reinforces the social bonds and ensure that everyone is in the same page and no one is left behind. And we also learn that youth and elders must walk in this path again. So elders can pass their experiences, knowledge to the younger generation to come, and whereas the youth can use their enthusiasm, their energy, and everything uh, to the project that and can make this world a much more relevant and much more secure place for future generation. So yeah.
Thank you, Yosa. Thank you, Raista, for that remark and sharing. You being a young woman as well, still, thank you. That really invites the youth to come forward and being part of this community and feeling part of the community, not being left behind or leaving anyone behind. We're going to move with
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry. I think we are experiencing some technical difficulties with Nati, so we will just go with the next panelist to give the final remarks.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that. The important lessons that we have learned from our work on climate change has and this is that I want to share with all other indigenous communities facing similar climate change challenges is number one, the importance of traditional knowledge. Indigenous communities have traditional knowledge and practices that can inform climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies. Preserving and integrating this knowledge with modern science can enhance resilience. The second thing is that empowering communities, especially indigenous communities, to lead their own climate initiatives can ensure that solutions that are culturally appropriate, effective, and sustainable. This includes supporting community-driven projects and decision-making processes. And the third thing is building partnerships, collaborating with external organizations, governments, and other stakeholders can provide access to resources, expertise, and support. However, we believe that it's crucial to ensure that these partnerships, number one, respect indigenous rights, respect our values, and our knowledge systems. So these are the things that we have learned in our walk, which is not a long one, but it's a very short one. So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that hiccup there with my internet. What I'm hearing is definitely there are solutions. I think it's just being able to share and find the motivation and the resilience to continue the work that we're all doing. We have concluded our questions that we had formed for the panelists, and we have a few minutes just before we close to answer a question that someone from the audience here. Thank you to the audience for staying with us here. It's not easy sometimes being in a virtual space for more than an hour. So thank you for being here. And we do have a question here. So we have one first. We have two questions. Maybe we can have one panelist respond to one question and another panelist to the other, just the timing. The question was, it's three in one question. What do you consider to be wisdom? And what do you consider to be indigenous wisdom? Do you encounter situations in which this indigenous wisdom is valued more or less?
I can jump in. From my perspective, wisdom is not just the accumulation of facts, or information. It's more a way of knowing. And so that way of knowing, for example, is how our people have understood the rhythms of the Mississippi Delta, the coastal marshlands. It's how we live with the tides. It's how we respond to adversity. It's how we listen to the land and the water. It's not about a checklist. It's not about a spreadsheet. It is a way of knowing. And that is an understanding that happens relationally. It's something that can't be integrated into Western science. I think that that approach is fundamentally flawed. And the kind of the reasoning behind that is looking at Indigenous knowledge as an add-on rather than a fundamental framework through which we can view whatever it is that we're working on. So I think of it as a way of knowing rather than information. And I think in order to protect that way of knowing, because increasingly what we're hearing is Indigenous peoples have climate solutions. We need Indigenous peoples to help save the world. Then what then naturally comes of that is kind of this extractivism, where there are people looking for pieces of information that they can take, that they can harvest, and then utilize for whatever climate resilience project that they're working on. So it's also important to think about this way of knowing through the principle of FPIC, through free, prior, and informed consent, and through ethical engagement with Indigenous peoples that honors their autonomy, their sovereignty, and the way in which they are in relation to the natural world, which is part of us, not separate from us.
Thank you, Rochelle, for the words that you shared, and really a way of knowing. I think you really were clear with that, and I think it resonates with all of us here. And we are coming to the closing. I know there were some questions already asked inside the chat, and I hope that we can respond to them through email. And if the panelists are more than welcome to share their context directly, you can share it right now before we conclude this meeting. Also, if we can perhaps share them, you can message us and we can share the context. Because I know there are other questions that perhaps were not answered. And if you want to follow up, I know there was that question with the student there asking, and Rachel, you have your hand up. Did you want to add before we do the closing remarks?
It was an accidental hand raise, my apologies.
Okay. So thank you to those who continue to stay with us. We really appreciate you taking this moment. It's very meaningful for everyone here, the dedication and the commitment. We have this phrase in Spanish. It's granito de arena. And I feel like, we can all contribute in our own ways and finding those ideas and really just trusting ourselves and inviting ourselves to step in together, because the more we step in, the greater it stands and the stronger our roots in the ground, and the harder it becomes for the major institutions and the more corporate and the higher colonial systems can push us down. And so I raise my hand and I raise my heart to all the panelists who have taken the time to be here and the audience as well. And we're going to go back to that, what you shared, Rochelle. We must help build the table, not just have a seat at the table. I think that was a really remarkable quote that you shared there in your first response to the answer. And I just really want us to reflect on that as well. And also to what Brian has shared with us, at least in one of his response, was we hold a generation behind us. And when do we start? With the last fish or the last tree? Thank you for that reflection, Brian, sorry, my apologies. And also a reflection from Donai that you shared was how everything needs to be culturally grounded. And everyone's culture is unique. and understanding that uniqueness, I think, is really valuable. And so thank you for bringing the uniqueness into the solution. And for Raista as well, for sharing your incredible responses to the collective action to really strengthen the social bond of leaving no one behind. Thank you for that wisdom, Raista. And thank you for every one of you who are here today listening, whether it be right now in this moment being live or in a later time, just to really take those reflections to you and understand that we're in this together and we can definitely build that resilience and rise up together. And so thank you so much for joining us on this webinar with wisdom in disaster response and climate crisis management. The work is not over. And so if you're interested in seeing how more we can contribute, we can share the contacts with each and every with the panelists. And for future events, if you're interested, you can visit and follow us on social media or website. And we'll definitely follow up and continue this conversation. Thank you. Panelists, do you want one final remark to share as well before?
Just thank you very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate you creating this. It's so important.
I just want to say that thank you for cultural survival. My final remark is let's honor and respect Indigenous wisdom, recognizing its value and importance in shaping our understanding of the world and our place within it as Indigenous people. By doing so, we can work towards a more inclusive and sustainable future as Indigenous people of the world.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity, and thank you very much for providing a platform for Indigenous people to speak up, to give their voices, and also thinking about the impacts of the climate change and actually working on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm actually a little bit rash when again and again try to fix my net connection. That's why I lost my concentration. It's okay, but thanks the cultural survival and working on it, and we need to connect again and again in the future for our survival, for our consistent and sustainable solutions. Thank you to all. Thanks for listening us.
Concludes our live webinar. Don't forget to give yourself a hug as well. You know, we're not alone. Thank you. Take care, everyone, wherever you are in the world.